It's interesting because none of the Sonic games, if you notice, have a level or a world, at least not usually, that take place in Japan. Most of like the worlds, or like in Sonic Adventure or Shadow the Hedgehog or these other places, they all take place in like American cities. Like Central City is basically New York in Shadow the Hedgehog because you got the White House in Washington D.C. And then in Sonic Adventure 2, you've got San Francisco, and you've got, they never like show Japan.
Oh, they don't. And the thing with Sonic Team is like, as far as I know, there hasn't been a lot of changes in terms of who works at Sonic Team. So it's as far as I know, it's the same people who have been there since the beginning, since the Sega Genesis days. And from what I can understand, like the biggest Ameriboos ever. Like like in every Sonic game, like once Sonic went to 3D, they just went full Americana. Like it's always like levels are based off American cities, American places. References to films are all American films. It's like they always like with Shadow the Hedgehog, like there's references to Independence Day in one specific scene that comes to mind.
Well, yeah, because they blow up the White House, but
yeah.
What a lot of people know is Takashi Iizuka is actually the head of Sonic Team of America, not Japan. So I don't know if he lives in America. I don't know. Hold on. It gives me the wrestler when I type up Takashi Iizuka. Okay, Takashi Iizuka is a Japanese game director, and he's currently the VP of product development for the Sonic franchise at Sega of America and Sonic Team. So I guess Sonic Team in general is like weirdly fascinated with American culture.
Immensely.
All the Sonic games are. It's weird because you notice none of the songs are in Japanese or have to be translated. They're all in English, and locations are all in America, and the people they get to sing these fucking songs for these games, like, they have to know these people.
Oh, they're like extremely deep cuts, like in terms of the people who they get. It's not like just some random celebrity that's currently popular or anything like that. They get like semi-talented, but like upcoming artists or people of notoriety.
They get actually pretty damn talented and actually pretty damn popular people to do some of these songs in these games. Shadow the Hedgehog, most people forget Powerman 5000, who the lead singer is the brother of Rob Zombie, did a song for the Shadow the Hedgehog game.
Almost dead, almost dead, almost dead to the world.
Crush 40. Crush 40 has a whole different story.
That's for sure. I mean, Sonic is famous for that old. It's that like, isn't it like that's famous for that like on we can never confirm nor deny the rumor that Michael Jackson worked on Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Like that was always like the big gag for the longest time.
Right. But he did.
That's probably true. Like, or if it hasn't already.
I thought he confirmed it himself. He like worked on it.
You know what? I think he did. But that just goes to show like that's the extent of which that team is invested in American culture.
Remix Factory, A2, Magnify, all made songs for Shadow the Hedgehog. They've gotten some really famous rappers to do the music, and I get the idea is back when Sonic the Hedgehog first came out in the 1990s, and they first came out with the Japanese version of the game, but then they Americanized it, and they changed the design of Sonic a little bit. They tried to make it appeal to Western audiences, and that's what ended up more popular than the Japanese version. The Americans liked Sonic more than Japan, and the design of the American Sonic was liked more than the more cutesy kind of version. They liked the cool, kind of frowning kind of version of Sonic. They kind of started favoring the Americans, I guess, over the Japanese.
I mean, I think with Sega, like when they made Sonic was already kind of like an experimental character. I mean, they had, correct me if I'm wrong, but back when they were making the character, they even said like he was inspired by like Bill Clinton or something in terms of his charisma and swagger.
That may have been one of the creators, I'm not sure.
Something along those lines. But that kind of when they made that game, and I think they saw like who was like really clicking with it, and then it was the American audience. They're like, we're gonna go full and deep with the American audience, and they just kind of never looked back.
It's always been about the American side of it now, which, I mean, I'm not complaining. But it's interesting, Sonic was created as sort of the anti-Mario. He was the rival to Mario, and his attitude was he was cool, he was edgy, and he was this, he was for the teens, and he was for the kids who, I'm thinking of just the cool kids on the block sort of thing. It's interesting, people say, like, Shadow the Hedgehog and Sonic 06's work out like super dark, serious, and edgy, and a lot of people don't really get that. I think even Sega said this, was that what people's perception over time, so what was kind of edgy and kind of like a suave, kind of awesome kind of character like Sonic is not exactly the same now, because now people look at classic Sonic as being cute.
I know, the edge has sort of been kind of washed away from Sonic, like he used to be the more contemporary, slightly edgy, not quite as safe, quote unquote, as like Mario. Mario would tell you to go to school, while Sonic was too cool for school. That was kind of the mentality.
Except Sonic had a school clubhouse game, but that's that's beside the point. Sonic's definition of edgy kind of evolved as times evolved, and so Sega was really just giving people what they asked for. And I remember watching a behind-the-scenes video on Shadow the Hedgehog, and it turned out kids were the primary demographic for Shadow the Hedgehog, because kids wanted to see Sonic with a gun.
And he was just like, and I remember he in the interview was like, I'm not so sure about that, but maybe Shadow. He's the darker character, the dark anti-hero that people have become so fascinated with after his big debut in Adventure 2.
Right. And so I've actually never had a problem with the edgy, what people call edgy Sonic the Hedgehog games, because I don't even know how to describe why I find some kind of appeal in them. I don't think they're amazing games, or they're underrated gems, or people are just wrong for hating on them. There are huge issues with those games. But I can see definitely a lot of effort and some kind of vision behind them, and I think Takashi Iizuka has a lot of good ideas. I think the issue with not necessarily Shadow the Hedgehog, because I think Shadow the Hedgehog gets stuff more right than some of the modern Sonic games like Sonic Lost World and Sonic Forces, was that the cutscenes in Shadow the Hedgehog and in Sonic 06 I find much better than like the stuff in Sonic Forces.
Yeah,
the fucking cutscenes in those games.
And Sega was like really interested in like being super cinematic with like their storytelling, like back in those days. Like people nowadays, in fact, there's like one famous, semi-famous, like a YouTuber reviewer who said something along the lines of, Sonic is supposed to be a cartoon, like you're not supposed to take it seriously at all in any way. And to an extent, I kind of agree with that almost. But at the same time, it's like back in like the 2000s and even all the way up until 2006, Sega was like really interested in experimenting with the character, making like these like more cinematic stories like Adventure 1 and 2, and kind of upping the ante and upping the danger, and trying to also play up what would consider to be like the cool factor of the time. Came from that is Sonic had a certain level of experimentation that wouldn't never be allowed in, say, something like Mario. That would never be allowed from Nintendo.
Well, to an extent, because Mario did try stuff like the anti-gravity in Mario Galaxy and the water shooter in Mario Sunshine, but not to an overwhelming extent like Sega did.
And those would be like, gameplay experimentations. It wasn't like with Sega and Sonic, where they would just try completely new different tones, and sometimes the world would feel completely different. Like the games sometimes wouldn't even feel like they're from the same canon, even though they were. Which
I'm not saying right now that I like these defenses. I'm saying Sonic the Hedgehog is a better franchise than Mario, which totally not.
No, I'm not saying that either.
But I can appreciate what Sonic the Hedgehog was trying to do, and I think does actually very well in some ways. And it sucks that like the adventure games and heroes are now kind of looked down on because of YouTubers like Game Grumps or some of these other people who now are criticizing the game, and all of a sudden now they're like shitty games that didn't have, effort or heart.
It's just complete nonsense. And then when Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 came out, like I remember when it came out, like people taught, like every kid I knew played those games, and they were just blown away by them. Like those games like introduced them to a fandom that many still stuck with, like into their teenage years. It was something that stuck with them. Much in the same way the first Sonic games came out on the Genesis.
Right, and you still look up and I don't. We just criticized in our last video. I don't like to use critics as a gauge of public consensus or to say that, oh, this is good because the critics said so. But even if you just go to the Wikipedia page, the general reception was that Sonic Adventure received critical acclaim, and it even says right here, some critics called it one of the greatest video games of all time.
Yeah, like it blew people's minds. Like many people felt it was just as trailblazing as Mario was when he jumped to 64. Like
right.
That's how big of a deal it was.
And people say like, oh well, it sucks because it's got these glitches and it's got problems with the gameplay.
How do people defend this game?
But yet they won't bat an eye at the glaring issues in like Super Mario 64 or the bugs in that game, which I think that game's a fucking masterpiece.
And I mean, Mario 64 is an amazing, 5 out of 5, 10 out of 10, amazing game. And, that game has tons and tons of glitches. I mean,
right.
To the point of people make tons of jokes about it all the time. Like, you can glitch that game to beat it without really doing much of anything.
You can beat it in 5 minutes with 0 stars because of the glitches in that game.
Yes, so I think just because something has technical problems just to go like, oh, well, it hasn't aged well, so it's not particularly good for the time. No.
Well, especially an older game that's like the first of its kind, because Sonic Adventure was one of the first games, because it came out in 1998. It's one of the first games that utilized the giant type of storytelling it was doing through cutscenes and through world hubs and through levels. It was one of the first games that ever did that, and it only came out 2 years after Super Mario 64, and the level of difference between the two is huge in just 2 years.
It had more, I guess you could say, a more cinematic story. There was, they had they introduced like weird legends of like in death and apocalypse, and there was gigantic battles in the sky with gigantic not spaceships, but like skyships, like what Eggman would make, and like it was just very ambitious and big, and they were able to make an actual solid, coherent, quality game. And that for the time was like, wow, it was astounding.
So Sonic Adventure and Shadow the Hedgehog, which has issues. I think the big issue I have with Shadow the Hedgehog is that you have to play through the game, 10 times to get every cutscene and go through every level, which I think is kind of a pain in the ass. Plus, like, I was playing through it the other day in preparation for this, was, like, some of the levels, when you go out of order or you go up or down, like Dark or Hero, like, it doesn't make sense. If you watch it in that order you played in, the story goes all over the place because they didn't exactly think about all of the subplots that could happen because, oh, I helped Eggman here, but then the next scene I'm trying to kill him.
I fucking rule!
Like it doesn't make sense why Shadow would suddenly be like reluctantly helping Sonic and the gang, and then all of a sudden he's just like, no, I don't care about you at all, with no context at all as to why he would suddenly change his feelings about that.
Shadow has extreme bipolar, and so, well, even if you play the game straight, if you go straight normal, even that story is not very satisfying because they're hoping that you go hero, dark, up, down, this and that. And so if you just play it straight, even then, not much happens in the story.
Like if you just play neutral for some reason, like Shadow the Hedgehog just becomes a megalomaniac who realizes he's a robot and decides he wants to murder Eggman. And
that's the story.
To kill Eggman and become like a dictator.
You're going straight to the place you created me from.
That's a very neutral response.
I have no strong feelings one way or the other.
What they should have done was combine like almost all the levels and make it like a 20 level game and then have like all the important cutscenes play through, because there are cutscenes that like go up in the hero story but then go down in the dark, and they're both important pieces of the story that you're supposed to see because you played through the game 10 times. What they should do is have that one long singular game that gives you all this information, and then you have the last story at the end instead of this up, down, up, down, up, down.
Most of Shadow the Hedgehog's problems could really just be fixed with streamlining.
Yeah. It's actually not that hard to fix the game, I think, because I actually enjoy the gameplay despite the camera being kind of a mess. But the gameplay and level designs,
it's certainly more playable than say Sonic 06 or Boom or other. It's certainly playable. It's not the gigantic dumpster fire that I think people try to portray it as online.
No, I don't think it is either. I think there are definitely some things I enjoy about it. whatever, it's edgy. I mean, again, we've put that to bed. But then now we come to modern day and we have Sonic Forces. And that game, I'm super conflicted on because when I first saw the gameplay for it and I watched a streamer play it, I thought it looked like the worst game I'd ever seen in my life because the level design was completely atrocious. I think everyone agrees at this point that the levels are way too fucking short because they only last like 2 minutes or less.
And so you can beat that story mode like within 2 hours. Some say they can beat it less.
Which I don't know because I beat it in I think 4, but I took my time. I didn't like rush. Short game. That's way shorter than any of the other Sonic games.
Very, very short.
So yeah. The problem is the new level designers they brought on had never worked on a previous Sonic game, so they didn't really know how to create a creative level like the stuff you'd see in Sonic Generations, which went on for 4 minutes, and they were really expansive levels that were kind of built into the environment. Whereas in Sonic Forces, it's like they just kind of built boxes in the world that they had built in the background, and so you got these really blocky level designs, and it's terrible to play through. So
and like there's always this sense of confinement. It never really feels like there's no real sense of scope like there should be, like with Generations. Like when you see the levels in that game, it's like there's a great sense of scope and scale, and like you can go to multiple ways to get to a destination rather than just one.
Yeah, there is. Oh, and in the level Seaside Hill in Sonic Generations, in the modern version, I think like every section of that level has like 4 different ways to get to the next part of the level. And it's ridiculous how many different ways you can take that level to the end. But that's sorely missing because in Sonic Forces it's extremely linear and the physics are terrible because it locks you to go straight whenever you boost. You can't go left or right when you boost. It's literally on a rails boost Sonic game and it's very unsatisfying to play.
There was one mechanic I still wish they hadn't gotten rid of, and that was from Unleashed, where when you can get to like the point where you can turn, like it's a really hard turn. You can just use the, what do you call it, buttons for Sonic to just kind of
drift,
grind around that drift, where he just kind of drifts around the corner. It can run. Like that sense of speed is amazing, and for some reason they decided not to keep that in games after. I don't know why.
It's the same engine too, or at least it's an updated version of the same engine.
Like when I was able to do that, I was like, wow! Like Sonic has never felt more fast than he did in that moment, because it's like truly nothing can stop him at that point. Normally in other Sonic games, when you get to a hard curve, you just go smack face into the corner.
Sonic Generations was the first and only game I ever pre-ordered. And I have not pre-ordered a game since, and I'm glad I did pre-order that game. It was like a big deal. I took it home, I played it, and I loved it. But I haven't done it since with any other game. And Sonic Forces, I think the biggest tragedy of Sonic Forces is it had the potential to be an amazing game. Just like Sonic 06 and Shadow the Hedgehog, I'd say I enjoy Shadow the Hedgehog way more than Sonic Forces.
In some ways, Shadow the Hedgehog is more consistent. Like, you're getting a more completed vision. What you see is, I think, what was intended. Whereas with Sonic Forces, it feels undercooked. Like, it feels like the game needed to need more time in development.
The difference between like Sonic Forces and Sonic 06 is Sonic 06. The game was rushed, and many features of the game just flat out don't work. There are features present in the game that just do not work and were never fixed. Whereas Sonic Forces, everything that's presented works as intended. It's just what was created was not up to par what they could have done. And so the story feels incredibly short, very lame, and very clearly like written by the same people who did the Lost World cutscenes, which were really short and full of quips and jokes. And so then they carried over trying to do edgy shit with this game, but they didn't know how to write it cinematically or do it in a way that actually was deep or expanded the characters or felt
more consistent with the Sonic characters and their history. It just seemed random.
Not just consistent, but not fleshed out. Like, the way they present the story beats in the game is really awful.
There's like a weird bit, some people have mentioned it, like there's a bit where like they've said something about how like Eggman has captured Sonic, and he's probably like, and he's tortured him for days all of a sudden, like, or something along those lines. And then like when they get around to showing a Sonic, he's like perfectly fine. He's just sitting in a cage, like, doing quips.
Oh, exactly. And every time there's like a dramatic moment in the game, it happens off screen or it's in a text box. They say like Eggman took over the world, and it's on a fucking text screen. They don't show it in a cutscene. They just write it in text.
Which is kind of a bummer, because like for many fans, I think one of like the most interesting aspects is what would happen if Eggman won. Like he finally got got the best over Sonic, and he's been planning. This is the moment he's waited his entire life for. Like, why would you?
He owns the world. He won.
Finally did it, and this should be the moment where it's like, wow, like we get to see Eggman's dream, his great plans come to life, and it never happened. Like you never get that sense of wow.
They try to cover the shortcomings through dialogue in the levels while you're playing, plus in some of the environments or in the world. Like that one part where you're outside in space and you see all of Eggman's ships and you see the egg and you see the Death Egg again. But there should be a cutscene where it's like this huge dramatic moment where like Eggman just wipes out everything and he takes over the entire planet and all the people are, locked away and there's nothing.
This is a character that had no problem blowing up the moon with the death weapon, Like he really doesn't care.
He blew up the fucking moon and we don't even see, a cutscene where he takes over the world. And it was same with bringing back Chaos and Zavok and Shadow for no fucking reason when they don't do anything in the game. They're just there for cameos, and like, yay, they're here, and then nothing.
It's kind of funny to see, like, with Generations. I mean, I love Generations, don't get me wrong, it's a great game, but it's like, Generations was kind of all about going, what they perceived as going back to basics, and kind of stepping away from the edgier stuff, and showing them, like, the quote-unquote innocence of Sonic, and they do kind of little jabs to the character's history, and those are funny, don't get me wrong. But then, like, once we get to Forces, it's like they're reintroducing all the edgy stuff again.
Which, I mean, in Sonic Generations, they had Crisis City and Silver the Hedgehog from Sonic 06, and, they had all the music from, like, the previous Sonic games as an option, where Shadow the Hedgehog's music was in the game. No, the problem is that somewhere between, like, 2008 and 2010... between Sonic Unleashed and Sonic Colors, I don't know if the writers changed, I'll have to look this up, but the style of writing and the way cutscenes were presented totally changed, and it went from having cinematic cutscenes to having very basic blocking, standing around in one location, telling jokes, and spouting out exposition so they can advance to the next level, instead of...
I think what happened was, after Sonic 06 bombed, and and Sonic Boom on top of that, like just so much backlash to what they've been doing. I think Sega just kind of wanted to play it a little more safe. So and so they brought on new writers. I think after they brought on new writers that came on during Lost World, and that there were the guys who wrote like Happy Tree Friends or something. That one specific series, I think it's like a YouTube series or something.
They wrote Happy Tree Friends?
They brought them on, friends. They brought them on to write Sonic. And it's funny, as I believe they said they weren't Sonic fans originally, and they kind of, but they were...
That's fucking hilarious.
They were creatively interested, so they took the gig, and they've been writing the games ever since. And I like them. I think they're creative guys. But it's kind of apparent, though, it's like after all the experimenting and all the weird stuff, they kind of wanted to get away from doing any of that. So that's why the cutscenes aren't quite as cinematic anymore.
That's why it's so jarring, though, in Sonic Forces, is they're trying to go back to the edgy cinematic stuff, but it's like they don't know how to do it anymore. They didn't bother. They kept the same formula for cutscenes from Lost World, but added in really edgy, not edgy, but not pretentious, just half-baked, sad dialogue, like this really awful dialogue in like the first cutscene from Forces. Vector walks in to the headquarters and he's like, "People are giving into despair now that Sonic's gone." It's like, who the fuck talks like that?
I know, like the way they talk about Sonic, it's like you would think he sounds almost like Superman from like the end of Batman vs Superman, like he died and like the world's in mourning, and like the world needs a Sonic.
The world needs Sonic, or like, but it's like it's in the span of like 2 minutes, like all this exposition is just dropped, and which I don't have a problem with that since Sonic has done that before, but it's rushed and it's weird the way it's done, and like they go from like Sonic is gone, and then like
it's extremely jarring to go from something like that's that somber, and then like the next moment like we're kind of back to like traditional like Sonic quippy stuff, and isn't that funny, guys? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I'm like, listen, pick one or the other. You just gotta pick one. I don't care which one. Just pick one.
Which they need to do that for the next game. Either go back to full cinematic, edgy stuff, which I wouldn't mind if they did it right, or just do quips and do Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles only, you know. But here, like, they introduced Infinite, and what a waste of a character. You could have had this fantastic villain. His theme song's great. I mean, it's dubstep. I'm not the biggest fan of dubstep, but the idea of him, like, he is the like personification of just pure fucking evil.
Well, I think he's supposed to be kind of like a parody of like edgy characters from Sonic's past. Like his edgy.
He's not a parody.
He's supposed to be. Come on, like that song they gave him, it's extremely like the nose with its dialogue. Like, it's so obvious.
No, they're being genuine. Come on. Come on, you know they are. That they're fucking around.
You're giving them too much credit.
No, because I genuinely think they never once in the game do they play it for jokes. They're serious that you want to view this guy as some kind of threat. But because of how quick his cutscenes are and how little dialogue he has, you never get a sense of who he was in the past and why you should fear him. And there's no real big moment where you're like, holy shit, I should really fear this dude. And so he's wasted in this potential, oh my god, this guy is a fucking beast. And nothing. That's kind of why I prefer the 2000s era Sonic games, and because they actually, even though there are flaws, they were more, I think, for me, enjoyable to play and more baked. They had full ideas kind of realized, even if they were a little messy.
They were more experimental back then. They were more experimental, and they sort of had a little more creative drive. Whereas these new ones, what Generations is great, and I think is. And we almost kind of forget, like, you know, Sonic Mania too. Like, Sonic Mania is also fantastic.
Sonic Mania is a fucking fantastic game, which is much more crowd pleasing, and I can definitely understand why people would flock to that game and say, oh, Sonic only works in 2D, which the 2D games are the most consistent in terms of reception and quality control.
I think what is nice, at least, you know, is even though they're, you know, Sega at times likes to play things a little safer for the sake of money or for the sake of backlash, they still do experiment. Like, you know, when they announced Sonic Forces, they said, like, you know, hey, we're going to be doing Sonic Mania, and we're going to be doing tons more games like that, but we're still going to have the 3D games, and the 3D games are still going to be kind of the place where we experiment. Like, you know, we're doing Sonic Forces
because they still sell.
Yeah, like, they still sell. Like, Sonic Forces made a boatload of cash. Like, because people were interested in seeing, like, oh, I can make my own OC, and, like, they're still experimenting, you know, brand.
Which is what sucks. If they remade Sonic Forces with better levels, longer levels, and levels, like, integrated into the environment, full cutscenes, fleshed out cutscenes with much better dialogue, then those two things right there could fix the game. Because I think everything else it does, the background art, the level, not the level designs, but the background art in the levels, like the environments in the level, are really nice. The soundtrack is phenomenal. I think it's a phenomenal soundtrack. I've had The Light of Hope and Fist Bump, like, on repeat.
They really make it like well, it's funny because I was gonna say they kind of make you fist pump, like they get you jazzed up for whatever's happening in the game.
Well, exactly. There were 2 points in the game that I actually kind of felt like, okay, this is actually pretty cool. This is a cool moment where they're running through null space. I'm sure you've seen that part. They're running through this null space, and then they escape, and then all of a sudden the fist bump theme plays. this huge moment, and like you both escape, and the song plays, and it's a great moment.
You're like really getting into it. You're like, yeah, baby, let's do this.
But then you play the level, and it's like an on the rails, level, and you're like, wow, this level could have been way better. But you had that little moment of genius, not genius, but
the problem with Sonic Forces is like for every time you have like that great moment, there's a moment that doesn't work, or B, that great moment is too short.
yes. Like there's another moment where they used fist bump or the double boost, and it's the last level where you defeat the core, you take out all 4 canisters. I'm not sure, I don't remember what they were, but you do the fist bump, and then you're like running through this long tube while it explodes, and it's exploding all around you, and you can spin around and around in the tube, and the entire facility's blowing up, and the song's playing, and it's like it's this great moment because like you've won the battle, like this heroic song is playing, and it's a great
Double boost! Show the world what we can do. You are next to me and I'm next to you. Pushing on through until the battle's won. No one's gonna give nothing to us. Into each other we put our trust. Standing united after the fight.
It's a great part of the level, but it's like 15 seconds long, and it's like, shit, this could have been, you could have done this and you didn't, or you tried and you were so close, and it's a shame. So what they need to do for future Sonic games, I don't think they should drop the edgy factor at all. I think they should double down on it to an extent, where if they're going to do edgy, go all the way with it. Don't do edgy and quips at the same time, because for me it's really jarring. Go full on, do the cinematics, do it properly though, because people were okay with Sonic 06 doing that, minus a couple people, doing that for Sonic 06 in concept. When they announced like the CG cutscene, they're like, oh, it's gonna be realistic. A lot of people were on board with it, and there was actually a lot of hype for that game. So it's not like people.
There was when Sonic 06 came out, or when it was coming out. I remember people were extremely hyped for it. People were fine with what they were selling. It was mostly just the bad gameplay and some of the terrible execution of ideas that soured everyone on it.
Why else are people trying to remake Sonic 06 in like the Sonic Generations engine? Like remake the levels? Because there are people who like the idea of the game. It's just the bad rushed part of it. And so they need to go all the way for the next installment. Otherwise, they're just going to keep doing these half-baked games with really great ideas that just don't go anywhere. And that's what sucks about the new Sonic games. For the next Sonic game, the only thing they have coming out right now is a new racing game, but I'm sure they're developing some kind of sequel to Forces, and I'm sure Christian Whitehead is working on something with Sega, because he's too big now to let him go. They're not...
Christian Whitehead, he's going to be a legend. Like, he's going to be a hot name in gaming now, like, forever.
Yes, he is. He made a name for himself with Sonic Mania. He is going to get jobs after this. Because at first all he did was he started out doing ROM hacks and, doing this, and then he was asked to develop the mobile versions of Sonic 1 and 2, and then they said, hey, you want to help us, you want to make a new 2D game, and then they made him the director of it, so he has most responsibility for that game, and look how it turned out. It's the highest rated Sonic game in 25 years, so... they're gonna keep him.
And who lived the dream. He lived the dream. He finally made it. Like he loved the character so much that he was dedicated to making content about him. And he is one of the few people who got to be a fan and lived the dream of getting to work on a character he loved so much.
And that whole game is like basically a fan game, because the people who made the music are also like indie fans. They're not they're not big music composers. They had 2 other small studios who were like also ROM hackers. They also helped on the game. It was like 100% a fan game, but Takashi Iizuka like overlooked it just to say, yeah, that's good.
Basically just gave his stamp of approval.
Pretty much. I mean, if they continue with that route, doing Sonic Mania and Sonic Forces at the same time, like doing modern Edgy or doing, that, and then doing Sonic Mania, I think it'll please everybody. I think the people who like the modern games will be happy, and the people who like the classic Sonic will be happy. But Sonic Team just needs to get their act together and, push back a release date a year and fix their games. Make sure they give us a full-baked, story and to the classic 2000's games and Sonic Adventure and Shadow, and look what they did right and do those.
I think Sega and Sonic Team, if they just stopped for if they just stopped putting a game in development and going, well, maybe we just need to get this out before Christmas, and if they just stop doing that and actually just finish the game when it's finished, the reception and I think a lot of the negative attitudes would probably just go away.
Yep.
We'll just kind of accept it for what it is.
They have great ideas, but it's hard. They're making it hard to fully realize them.